So I now have the great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Tracy Galvin. Tracy is an education developer at the Centre for Educational Development at Queen's University Belfast. Her key areas of expertise are initial teacher education, communities of practice, and professional development through building a JEDI community, which stands for Accessibility, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the Curriculum. Internal to Queen's, Tracy is chair of two working groups, Universal Design for Learning and Internationalising the Curriculum. She's a member of the QUB Disability Forum and is a race equity champion as part of the Race Equality Charter with Advance HE. External to Queen's, she is part of two international UDL groups. One is Include, that stands for International Collaboratory for Universally Designed Education, where she's part of the Professional Development Committee, and the IRN UDL Anti-Racism Special Interest Group. She's also a member of the UK GISC Community Leadership Team on Accessibility. So we're really delighted to welcome Tracy, and I'm going to hand over to Tracy now. So I will stop presenting and over to you, Tracy.
Hi Lydia, thanks very much. I noticed our little marks around the first screen there. I think that we were playing with earlier, so sorry, I never changed it. I just want to thank Lydia for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share some of the things that we've been doing in Queen's, I suppose, over the last couple of years and our intentions to continue this journey. So today, the heading is Promoting Inclusivity Through Universal Design for Learning. I suppose first what I want to do is I want to actually showcase my appreciation for your presence here today. I know we've had 2 years of difficult time. We are continuing to go through that journey, but I just want to showcase that I do appreciate you giving up your time to learn together, to learn from one another. I just want to say thank you. And of course to John, who's our ISL interpreter today. Thank you. Okay, so I just posed a couple of questions here for you to think about. Now, if you feel you want to share some of these, please do so in the chat, or just jot some things down, or just be pensive and think of these things yourself. So the first one there is, what are your goals for the workshop? The second one is, what key takeaways do you want from the session? And the third one is, are you willing to share your own knowledge and experiences? And the third point there, we have a lot of experts in the room and I can see you. I really do want you to get involved, add to the conversation, write some comments in the chat and just get involved. And that basically comes down to contributing to the conversation. We are all here to learn together. You can use the chat function, use emojis, like people, give smiley faces. I have a couple of reflective questions, and during that you're more than welcome to raise your hand and unmute and ask or make a comment, anything like that. Lydia has already in the first slide kind of just highlighted some things if you're willing to share something on Twitter. So you can, my profile, you can find me at Tracy Galvin 77. You can use the @UL, the @forum, @teaching and learning, so TL, and hashtag UDL_UL. Please use those as you go through. I just want to point out one thing in terms of accessibility. I have no problem at all you taking a screenshot and sharing the content, but I would ask you in terms of accessibility to really think about that if you're sharing a screenshot, that you include all text in it. Okay, so the first question I pose here, and this is just for you to think about, like, what influence do you have in your role? We're all coming from various, just even by seeing the participant list there of who's in the room. We have people who are in senior leadership roles, we have people in middle management, and we have people from grassroots level, from the ground up. So I just want you to think about that. What influence do you have in your role? So whatever I'm talking about throughout the session, I do want you to think about what can you do differently to change. Okay, so the changing landscape of third level. I'm using the word third level. I know I'm working at university, UL is a university, but I include everything here in terms of further education as well, because they're doing amazing work at the moment, especially around UDL. So I'm going to use the term third level because I don't want to exclude anyone. We've all noticed that there's a lot of changes over the past 5 to 10 years, especially around EDI. Now, I'm using the term EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. I much prefer the word equity for obvious reasons, but the term that is used in most universities is equality, diversity and inclusion. But for me, that is often a one-size-fits-all approach, where everyone is treated the same, and it becomes a buzzword often where people are comfortable with what seems to encompass everything, but actually often excludes disability. So in the bigger context, and there would be, there's words here like sustainable development goals, globalization, internationalization. These are all words that are very common across third level at the moment and are continuing. So if you were to look at anybody's mission statement, what are the values? What is the university trying to achieve? These are all terms that are very much used all across Ireland and the UK at the moment and globally. Our diverse learners, this is really important because anybody who is working in third level for the past, 5, 10, 15 years, you'll see the changing nature of our learners. And that includes things like widening participation. And I know in UL you have a great program, the Access program, that many years ago I had, worked a little bit with. You have disabilities. So a lot of people, coming into university, they might disclose, but there are significant numbers that don't disclose any form of disability. And of course, the increased number of our international students. And while this list isn't exhaustive, of course, we have parents, we have carers, we have refugees, we have asylum seekers, we have military, we have part-time students. So the list is very extensive. And how do we cater for that in our institutions, not just as educators, but also the wider context, like our support services, our professional services, our administrators. Many of these learners actually face significant barriers throughout their learning journey, and we need to really think about that as institutions, how we can minimise that and maximise learning. And of course, finally there, in terms of technology and digital accessibility, this is something that we're really, over the past 2 years, we have all experienced that shift to online. Many of us are still there. We can have this session today virtually, which is amazing, and that opens access to a lot of other people having access to such seminars. Digital poverty has been huge over the past number of years, and I think we really, have identified, and everybody experienced, that there was some learners working from a mobile phone, didn't have any form of technology, didn't have access to Wi-Fi, didn't have a safe space to study, and the technology became centralised over the past 2 years. So it'll be really interesting to see where we're going and how we navigate this future space. So I'm going to do this as I'm going to look at the bigger picture, then I'm going to come into Universal Design for Learning, and then I'm going to come back out as well. So the bigger picture, Sustainable Development Goals, especially number 4, it talks about ensuring inclusion and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. This is really important, and this is very much where I see, in terms of education, in terms of EDI, in terms of UDL, how it fits in here. Of course, you have the UN Convention for the Right of Persons with Disabilities. You have universal design, UDL and inclusion are key to achieving the right to education and training, and you have the European University Association, who explicitly talk about the importance of EDI, and they name explicitly UDL and accessibility as 2 key features. I'm just going to go into that a little bit further. So the European University Association, when addressing equity and inclusion, they state 3 challenges. The first challenge there is the lack of concrete measures and initiatives to address equity and inclusion at higher education institutions. The second one is digital poverty and digital inclusion. And the third challenge is training academic teaching staff on inclusion and equity topics. And Universal Design for Learning and Accessibility, as I said, are explicitly called out there as important to try to minimise those barriers. So what did we do in Queen's, and what are we trying to do? And by no means am I saying we're leading the way or anything, but there have been intentional steps to try to embed UDL and accessibility throughout the university and support our faculty to do that. There is no silver bullet, and every institution will take their own approach. So about 2 years ago, in 2019, I got a small grant to do a project on advanced HE, or with advanced HE on EDI in the curriculum. This was done in partnership with 6 other UK partners or institutions, and there was a slight delay because of the global pandemic, but it did get completed within a 2-year period. I consulted with over 400 faculty, students' union, leadership, middle management, student services, professional services, all across the institution that I talk about and refer to as our QUB community. And you know, we got some great feedback. We got a lot of data of what people want and their future, the next steps, and what are their expectations. So Advanced HE have a thematic framework of embedding EDI in the curriculum. And I want you, anyone who's kind of familiar with Universal Design for Learning, I want you to look at this, and as I read it out, think about it with your UDL hat, because UDL fits in here and the framework calls out all of these areas. So they talk about, at a higher level, the institutional management and coordination. They talk about staff and student engagement. They talk about assessment and feedback, learning resources, physical sites and environments, the curriculum design and delivery, and inclusive policies and procedures. And I'm sure, I know you all do have a lot of work done around EDI policies, so you know you probably will identify some of these already. So some of the things that we've done, we've taken small steps but intentional steps. So about 2 years ago, there was a Universal Design for Learning working group set up, and that includes all our QUB community. There's people right across the institution. It's not just for faculty, because we see this as a wider whole community effort to try and ensure equity for everybody. We've had a lot of EDI seminars and workshops. We've developed an accessibility toolkit and a blog, and I see Jenny is in there. I do have, Lydia, I don't know if you've shared it already, but I do have a link tree. I don't like to add links throughout a session. I think it can get very confusing for people and start opening things, but Lydia will share the link tree. I have a lot of resources to a lot of this stuff that you can have access to afterwards, and increase your understanding of various aspects. We set up a small group teaching Canvas course. So this every year has over 400 those new to teaching, so postdocs, postgraduate students who are teaching on in tutorials and labs. Anybody who's external, like barristers, dentists, people who are coming in and teaching part-time, so they can all get access to this course. And we shifted this course to the online environment. We use Canvas, and we get great feedback with that. But the important thing here is this course is embedded and underpinned by Universal Design for Learning and accessibility. We support a lot of our teaching and learning forums. So a number of our schools, we have 15 schools in the universities, and not every school has a teaching and learning forum. Some of them are very advanced, and I support them in various workshops and things like that. We recently had an assessment handbook developed, and that has, again, Universal Design for Learning explicitly called out in that. We have just developed our teaching and learning principles, which I won't talk about now because I actually show a lot of information in the next few slides about that. We're starting our conversations around decolonizing the curriculum, and I'm happy to have a conversation around that later. There's an EDI in the curriculum CEDA accredited course just being finished off and being developed, and that's for all teaching staff or those in a learning support role. We're also going to invite the students' union reps and course reps as well in there. So we'll have a shared language and terminology around what EDI is and what UDL is. And we're currently developing, we have a number of EDI academic leads especially in our health sciences and medical fields. Because of their accreditation and professional bodies, EDI is significantly called out and seen as important. So we've faculty employed in those areas. And then finally, in terms of Athena's 1, we're institutionally going for gold, and EDI is in the curriculum is a key part of that. And we have recently signed up for the Race Equality Charter, and I just wanted to call those things out if anyone wants to ask me anything later. So I'm going to come back to the teaching and learning principles. So you're not really expected to see, I have a poster in the link tree of the image on the left hand side. There's 7 teaching and learning principles, and all of these terms will really not be new to anybody who works in third level. So the first one there is blended by design. The second teaching and learning principle is student voice, student choice. So it was really important to get the choice in these principles, especially highlighting the importance in universal design for learning. The third one is communities. The fourth one is relevant and global curriculum. The fifth one is authentic assessment. And the sixth one is feedback and learner progression. And the seventh one is digital skills. Now, any of my accessibility experts in the room, don't panic just yet. We do have accessibility explicitly called out. I'm going to focus on number 4 there, relevant and global curriculum. And we really wanted to advance the thinking of our faculty around critical pedagogies. So I just want to focus in on that a little bit. We have a number of various frameworks, theories, pedagogies called out of where we see, the shift and moving forward. And this relevance will become clearer later on in terms of the direction that UDL is going in. So the first one there is decolonizing the curriculum. The second one is digital accessibility. The third one is universal design for learning. The fourth one is anti-racism pedagogy. We have education for sustainable development. We have culturally sustainable pedagogy, internationalizing the curriculum, open pedagogy and practice, active global citizenship, and ethics and care of pedagogies of care. Of course, social emotional learning is included in that, and mental health. And I just wanted to flag them in terms of these are what we want our faculty to be more aware of to support our learners. So I just took a couple of screenshots from our Canvas course. So we have over 4,000 of our teaching staff. This is now on their dashboard on Canvas, and that's really important. So we've kind of a high level first, like what it is. So what is relevant in global curriculum? To design and develop an inclusive and equitable quality education to ensure that it serves a diverse and global audience and empowers and nurtures global citizens. So students will experience an inclusive and accessible curriculum that is future focused, in that it is designed around a world that is interconnected, that requires active citizenship and genuine collaboration that goes beyond national borders. Now, in terms of accessibility, we've audio files for everything that's in our Canvas course, but you'll just see on the top there in terms of the UK PSF, so the fellowships with Advanced HE, we mapped these teaching and learning principles to the fellowships. I think that's really important because we have huge numbers of our teaching staff that have gone through and have we have, I think the biggest senior fellowship across the UK, so that's something really to be proud of. We've also mapped the whole course to the UDL principles, so we're just trying to constantly get the language and terminology through, what the checkpoints actually look like, and so forth. So then I just included here in terms of universal design for learning, like what is it and what can you do? So each one of those pedagogies and frameworks are highlighted at this kind of level to give a very brief overview of what that looks like. And then we have top tips afterwards. So what is it? UDL is an inclusive framework and philosophy that aims for equitable, accessible and flexible learning. It focuses on 3 principles: engagement, representation, action and expression. It's learner-centered and recognises learner variability. The framework provides a set of progressive guidelines, offering suggestions that can be applied in any discipline to ensure that all learners can access, have a voice and participate in meaningful, changing learning opportunities. So how can you do it? So we just have given a very, again, high level kind of some ideas of what our teaching staff can do. Embed flexibility throughout your course design. Use the UDL framework to review and reflect your existing practice and identify areas of improvement. Share the UDL framework with your learners and allow co-design and assessment and rubrics. Take 1 or 2 of the points on the framework and start making small changes. Example, represent learning materials in multiple formats or provide different ways for learners to engage in live sessions. And embed student partnership through learner voice and choice. So that's just to give our staff a kind of a very brief overview. And then after each one, we have kind of 3 UDL top tips. And you'll see this, I know this is slightly small, so I do apologise for that. I just had to try and showcase the kind of big broad area of what's in the course for our faculty. But you'll start to look at the language here, and I think what's important to highlight is it's kind of pushing the UDL framework forward, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So some of the tips here are like support, trust and honour different learner voices and lived experiences, and plan for the intersectionality of learner variability, provide culturally inclusive and accessible learning materials, embed learners' cultural background and prior knowledge as it may impact the level of understanding or interpretation of text, symbols, assessment examples, case studies, emojis or visuals. Use clear, simple and inclusive language. Scaffold academic writing skills and explain complex terms by providing digital glossaries for key terminology, discipline-specific technical language, symbols or vocabulary. Encourage learners to access content in non-dominant languages by using Blackboard Ally alternative formats or Microsoft Immersive Reader. So we use Blackboard Ally and it's embedded within our Canvas VLE. And the third one there, provides safe spaces for discussion, so learners can critically reflect and self-interrogate their own biases, prejudice, assumptions and stereotypes, and to be an ally to all and be comfortable with your own discomfort. So you'll start to see we're stretching our staff a little bit there to really think internally about your own positionality, but then think about the learners who are in front of you. Okay, I'm just going to pause a second and drink some water. So just read this question here. Is there anything in your role that you can identify with here or have influence over? If you just want to add that into the chat, that would be great. I know many of you in the room have influence, so definitely. Is there anything that resonated with you so far that you have influence over, that's highlighted, that you think you can resonate with, or that you could do something in small steps? No, I'll let you think about that, okay? Because we'll come back to that at the end. Okay, so just really honing in a little bit around learner variability and barriers. And everybody, no matter what your role is here, I'm not just referring to educators, I'm referring to administrators, I'm referring to leadership, I'm referring to student support services, professional services. Think about whatever your role is, just think about these things. So, like, why do we actually want to embed universal design for learning? It is a learning design approach that recognises there is no average learner. Instead, it's designed to give all individuals equal opportunities by minimising barriers and maximising learning. We need to reflect on our curriculum design, teaching, learning and assessment, but also technology, physical spaces, our processes and how we serve and support others. And I'm including all of our community. I'm including our staff and our learners. Learners come from a variety of backgrounds, abilities, skills, responsibilities, experiences, cultures, identities, disabilities, learning difficulties, linguistics, needs and preferences. And again, that list isn't exhaustive. So I think everybody would actually recognise, you know, whatever type of role you are, the different type of people that you're working with and you're involved with. So Ted Rose in a TED Talk, and I have the TED Talk in the link tree that you can view afterwards. I would recommend it. It's a very interesting watch. He also has a book, The Myth of the Average Learner. He basically says that there's no two people the same. So whether you're in a course, you know, whoever the teaching staff are, whatever you're studying, you basically are so different. And he talks about this jagged edge. So whether it's your perception, your cognition, your interest, your language, the memory, no two people are the same. So you could be studying a module and you could be highly engaged, highly motivated, really interested in the topic, and you are just thriving in that module. You may be taking a module at the same time with someone else on a topic that you have absolutely no interest in. You're not engaged, you're not motivated, you're not enjoying that module at all. So those two modules, even though it's on the same course, the learner will basically approach that in a completely different way. He talks about this that you should ban bad design. So he said you should preempt a lot of this, in terms of your design, preempt variability, preempt that no two people are the same, and actually ban bad design. So I would highly recommend that you listen to that talk, because it's really, really good. The other thing I want to highlight in terms of UDL are, what are some of the barriers to learning? If you just want to put in the chat there a second, I'll just pause and think about what are the barriers to learning. What would be a barrier for any learner that's coming into our institutions? And I'll just check the chat. Imposter syndrome. I think we all feel a bit of that, Patrick. Hello. It's great to see names, lots of familiar names. Stress, feeling you don't belong, it's huge. It's really, really, for various groups. Mental health. One size fits all. Outside influences, yeah, of course. I mean, everybody's so different. Oh, there's my friend Mary from America. Hello. Stress, traditional teaching practices, caring duties, yeah. We have lots of, the increase of carers is significant, and I do hope UL has a carer society. There's a great support in Queen's for the carer society. Finance, yeah, so true, Lisa. I mean, we saw that really, we're continuing to see that, and the increase, with fees, the cost of rent is just extortionate at the moment. Lack of cultural connection, yeah, that's very important. Very good. Just keep them coming in. Thanks very much. Okay, so I just have a few things here, and as you've included some of these in the chat. Hopefully some of these will be added to. So an inaccessible curriculum design or content. When people say inclusion, but they only focus on a particular group. And sometimes that's the easier group to cope with. So it might just be disability, and you might exclude the travelling community, which in Ireland we're historically well known for that group, that community to be excluded. Segregate or isolate learners in terms of language or ability. Discriminate from bias, prejudice, stereotype to some groups and particular microaggressions. This is so common, and I think sometimes we don't realise that the language and terminology we use in our learning spaces or in our workspaces equally. And we often put it down to, oh, well, I'm just having the crack, or I'm just having some banter. And I think we really need to be explicit and consider, how we make people feel. And it's okay to call people out, but it's all about a learning experience and being in that safe space where you consider yourself to unlearn and then relearn. Crisis, so lack of understanding or willingness to change practice. And this is really important, because there is just people who don't see that actually they might be the cause of the problem. Don't be afraid to try new things, especially when something is not working. And often not listening, not actively listening to our learners and excluding people. I think that's really important. And some of the ones that you put in there are really, really good. Here, I just want you to think about, I don't want you to write anything here. I just want you to think about some of the things that I've said and reflect a little bit and just think, am I actually part of the problem, or am I part of the solution? And hopefully you are part of the solution. But if not, and you do actively see things happening, why are you not part of the solution? I think it's important to think about that. What's really important here is that it takes a community. No one person or individual can make change. If we make change collectively, of course you can make change as an individual. I mean, collectively, we can be a lot more effective. So I'm talking about everyone from community leaders, support staff, the systems and environments, our peers, our colleagues, professional experts, faculty, but at the centre and the core of that is the individual who doesn't feel that sense of belonging. And I think, collectively we can have such a strong voice, and we do need to dismantle systemic inequalities. I think that's really, really important. And my good friend, Dr. Eric Moore in America, in his book UDL in higher education, he talks about expert learners, expert teachers, expert systems. And what he really means for me, what I get from that is he basically means that, you know, we can do everything possible as an educator, an administrator, an assistive technologist, but if the system is, you know, inequitable in itself, this exasperates the inequalities. So for us to be sustainable in change, we need to dismantle and break those systemic inequalities. So when thinking UDL and just thinking at the very practical level, so if you have anyone here who's in learning support or who's in a teaching role, it comes back to the very basics. So there'll be nothing new here of what I'm going to say when you're thinking about universal design for learning. And if anything, with the shift online, these things have even been highlighted. And in some ways, people didn't consider these as in-depth as what they had to consider in the past 2 years. So have I clear goals or learning outcomes? Is my content accessible? Are my learners engaged and motivated to learn? Have I modelled effective evidence-based practices? Have I scaffolded the learning to prepare my learners to be successful in their assessments, so if they can demonstrate their knowledge and understanding? And that there would be nothing here if you're in any type of a supporting or teaching role in terms of the language. I'm just going to add this. I have this in the link tree, and I know Jen McFarland, my colleague, just popped in the room there a minute ago. So myself and Jen developed this about 6 months ago, Accessibility Thrives. And I really feel you can't have UDL without accessibility. And I know Thomas Shaughnessy from UL wrote a book chapter on that exact topic. So we developed this acronym to really simplify for faculty to try and think of, you know, what do I need to do? What are the high level key aspects of accessibility? So we came up with the acronym THRIVES. So T stands for tables, H stands for hyperlinks, R stands for recordings, I stands for inclusive font, V stands for visuals, E stands for examine, and S stands for structure. And I know a number of you in the room have seen this before. I don't have the whole poster there. I have the audio recording and I have the poster in the link tree, so you can look at that. And it's a very simplified way to remember and think about accessibility when you're designing and developing your content. So what can educators do? Start with accessibility, predict the barriers in curriculum design, delivery and assessment, design for learner variability, model good practice, provide exemplars and scaffold learner progression, build intentional, flexible and inclusive curriculum design to include choice, be conscious of bias and prejudice, and find other professional learning communities and support others. And I would say actually in Ireland, you're doing amazing work at the moment around universal design for learning and building those communities, which is really good to see. So I'm just going to, for anyone who isn't aware of this, like the Universal Design for Learning framework comes from CAST in America, and they're currently envisioning the guidelines towards rising to equity. And I just kind of want to flag this a little bit because I think it's really important, and that's why I really wanted to see the interconnectivity with EDI and UDL and start to see how are these merging. They're absolutely not the same thing, but actually the framework of UDL is shifting much more towards equity to ensure that all groups and learners are included. They're widening the framework to not just put the focus on the learner and the educator, but to look at the wider context and the wider systems. So driving UDL forward. So thinking about things that they're trying to include, they're trying to be much more intentional support for individual variability and intersectionality. So they're going much deeper into identity, culture, race, age, disability, ethnicity and educational background. They're thinking about a broader focus beyond the classroom, such as systemic inequalities. So they're trying to come up with more and include and give ideas and options for leadership, administration, structures and processes, learning support, access into third level, recruitment, professional bodies, accreditation, community engagement and technology. So they're really widening the framework, and it's not to make the framework even bigger than it already is because it's quite significant, but it's actually to really refine it and to make more to really give you the steps, what you can achieve next and how you actually go about doing that and what it looks like. So I'm nearly at the end, so we have a few minutes to have a chat. I just want to end up by stating that it's really important to drive the UDL framework forward and your various EDI policies about being an ally and being an accomplice. All of us share a responsibility for supporting inclusion in our communities. This often means being an ally and accomplice, recognise the barriers of others, actively listen and take an active role in tackling them and dismantling inequalities. Start small, be consistent and intentional. Unlearn and be comfortable with your own discomfort. And in terms of sustainability and impact around UDL, I already mentioned Athena's one. There needs to be a shared language and terminology, and that can be different from institution to institution, that's okay. Include learners to be UDL and accessibility ambassadors, long-term interventions, sustainable change. We need committed leaders, because without this, a grassroots approach, leadership is key here. Prioritise UDL through the EDI agenda. Everyone is responsible across the institution, not just in a siloed approach. Interconnectivity with the curriculum and the wider institution, and we absolutely need culture change. I want you to think again about your influence in things that I've said. You can keep this for yourself. You can type it in the chat if you want. Like, what 2 or 3 things do you do to affect change and influence others? Because you could be in any position, and we all have that option of influencing others and making change happen. So what do you actually intentionally do there? Just a few things to look forward are to that there is in January another Include seminar, and myself, Eric Moore and Hilary Goldwith-Foles will be doing a seminar on UDL and anti-racism. So I will promote that on social media, so just watch out for that. We recently wrote a book chapter entitled Who Am I to Talk About Race? White Allies, Universal Design for Learning and Anti-Racism in Higher Education. So as soon as that comes out in print, I will again share that. We'll have an annual Teaching and Learning Conference in April, hopefully, in Queen's, and you're all welcome to come along and maybe put a submission in. We'll start planning that in January, and that'll be overarching sustainable development goals, but universal design. EDI is a key theme in there as well. Building communities of practice, and in UL we've seen that you're doing that greatly at the moment. I'm happy to be part of it. We're developing an EDI toolkit currently in Queen's, so that hopefully will be ready for March. And then, of course, I talked about the UDL Rising for Equity. Please do keep an eye out for that on the CAST website. And then just some reflective questions. Did you achieve your goals from the workshop? What key takeaways did you take from the session? And did you learn from other experiences? So you can put that in the chat, or you can just jot those down. And thank you. Your influence and use your influence and your voice to empower others. Thank you.